The House will come to order. Today, the pledge is led by Representative Chris Richardson, House District 56.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Schiebel, please call the roll. Of course.
Representatives Armagost, Bacon, Barone, Byrd,
Here.
Basenecker, Bottoms, Bradfield, Bradley, Brooks, Brown, it's here, Caldwell, Camacho, Carter, Clifford, Representative DeGraff is excused. Duran, English, Espinoza, Ferre, Froelich, Garcia, Garcia Sander, Gilchrist, Gonzalez, Hamrick, Hartsook, Jackson, Johnson, Joseph, Kelty, Leader, Lindsay, Linstead, Luck, Representative Luck, Lukens, Mabry, Marshall, Martinez, Morrow, McCormick, Pascal, Phillips, Puglisi, Richardson, Ricks. Representative Ricks is excused. Rutinel, Ryden, Sirota, Smith, Soper, Stewart K, Stewart R, Story, Sukla, Taggart, Titone, Valdez A, Velasco, Weinberg, Wilford, Winter, Woodrow, Woog, Zokai, and Madam Speaker.
Oh, what a beautiful morning. Good morning, Rep. Ryden. We do have a quorum with 63. Excellent. Representative Ryden.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Journal of Friday, May 2nd, 2025 be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Members, you have heard the motion that the journal be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Okay, members, we have got business. Our majority leader just said we do. We're going to go for a ride. Okay, Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move to proceed out of order for consideration of third reading of bills, final passage.
Seeing no objection, we will proceed out of order for third reading of bills, final passage. Yes, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to lay over Senate Bill 185 until Monday.
Seeing no objection, Senate Bill 185 will be laid over until Monday, May 5th. Okay, Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 142.
Senate Bill 142 by Senators Baisley and Cutter, also Representative Velasco, concerning changes to the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board's code implementation requirements.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 142 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 142 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Byrd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Byrd votes yes. Please close the machine. With 42 aye, 21 no, and 2 excused, Senate Bill 142 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 295.
Senate Bill 295 by Senators Mobley and Bridges, also Representatives Byrd and Sirota, concerning transferring money received through the firearms and ammunition excise tax into the mental and behavioral health excise tax cash fund and in connection therewith making, reducing, and appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 295 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 295 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Byrd.
Yes.
Representative Byrd votes yes. Please close the machine. With 43 aye, 20 no, 2 excused, Senate Bill 295 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 311.
Senate Bill 311 by Senators Mobley and Kirkmeyer, also Representatives Byrd and Taggart, concerning the balances of inactive cash funds.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 311 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 311 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Byrd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Byrd votes yes. Please close the machine. With 46 ayes, 17 no, and 2 excused, Senate Bill 311 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 292.
Senate Bill 292 by Senators Mobley and Bridges, also Representative Sirota and Taggart, concerning the creation of the Workforce Capacity Center.
Madam Majority Leader,
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 292 on third reading and final passage.
the motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 292 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Byrd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Byrd votes yes. Brown. Please close the machine. With 43 aye, 20 no, and 2 excused, Senate Bill 292 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 130.
Senate Bill 130 by Senators Gonzalez and Weissman, also Representatives Froelich and Zokai, concerning providing emergency medical services and in connection therewith making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader,
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 130 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Bradley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the part that I love, third readings on our last Saturday, everyone. Listen, I'm not coming in for a special session. I'm just telling you that on the record. Get your act together. You got 5 days, get it together. This bill, and I appreciate the bill sponsor pulling me to the side in a very respectful conversation. I truly appreciate that. This bill was said to follow federal EMTALA. And the more that we dug in, the more that we saw there were some questionable behavior in this bill. There are women that I understand in the state of Colorado, in a state that has enshrined abortion, and I know I live in this state, and I know that people voted on it, and I understand that. It doesn't mean I'm for it. I'm emphatically against it in all situations. There are women that can go to different abortion clinics and get an abortion. This bill is talking about emergency situations. So this is not women that are presenting to an abortion clinic to terminate their pregnancy. And so I have a really hard time, you guys, especially with a baby that I carried and loved and watched a heart beating from 4 weeks on, that says emergency medical condition means under the heading of abortion. I don't understand it. There are women that should be able to choose. In this state, you guys would say abortion is reproductive health care. But there are women like me, if there was a choice between saving my life or saving the life of my baby, every time I choose to save the life of my child, I choose it every time. Every single time I choose for my baby to live. And we are not given that a choice in this bill, because we are not even saying the patient may pose a threat to the health of the safety of the patient and nothing about the baby. It is pretty much not even a discussion in this bill. And so for people like me, and I would say most people in all of our districts, most women in all of our districts would say, save our babies. Put them first, because that's what moms and dads do. We put, on an airplane, what are you supposed to do? You put the mask on who? Yourself first, sorry. That was a really bad. I'm sorry, that was a bad analogy. You get what I'm saying, people. Come on. Thank you, Rep. Bacon. Take two. Take two. You know, I can always call myself out and not take myself too seriously. Bad analogy. Don't post that, please. We're supposed to take care of our kids. Y'all know what I mean. You're supposed to take care of your kids, okay? And parents always want to take care of their kids. We always want to take care of our kids. We feed them. Okay, I got a better analogy. You ready for this one? I will eat last. I will eat pizza cold. I will eat cold food hot. To make sure, last night I left you guys. I had to celebrate my child's birthday. Made sure everyone ate, and there was a couple pieces of pepperoni left. That's what this mom had for dinner. Couple pieces of pepperoni. Because parents put their kids first. On airplanes, different story. We're going to save ourselves first. But that's what I'm saying. Where is the baby in this? And why do we keep making it so it's not about the baby in this state? Because there's a lot of us that are for the babies. We heard it last week. This bill in the NICU is for the babies. Where are the babies? Because most of us want our babies saved. And so I came up here yesterday and talked about that. And we had a lot of doctors, or a couple of doctors who came and testified that there are 2 patients involved when there is a pregnant woman that it comes to the emergency room. There's 2 patients. And then we talked about the sterility, and I heard in testimony that this talks about a tubal ligation. And tubal ligations are not considered a safe and elective procedure. They are considered a safe and elective procedure, not an emergency. It's a surgical procedure to prevent pregnancy, typically performed in a hospital or outpatient surgical clinic. So when someone has an ectopic pregnancy, which is not a true pregnancy, it's not a pregnancy that can go to term, the fallopian tube is removed. It's an emergency. 100% is an emergency. But that's not when you get a tubal ligation. You have the fallopian tube removed, and you make sure the woman's not bleeding out. Sterility is not included in EMTALA, but it's included in this. So my question to the bill sponsors on seconds was, if you're mirroring federal law, but you've included sterilization, and you then say that federal law doesn't include the safety of the baby, why couldn't we as Colorado include the safety of the baby? If you're including sterility that's not included in federal law, then why couldn't we as a state say, for all of you moms out there that would rather die and get your baby here alive, why couldn't we say a threat to the health and the safety of the patient, which includes the baby, because the baby is the patient too. When you're pregnant, there are 2 patients involved. And so I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that we say that we are a pro-choice state, and every time we have bills like this and my caucus comes to the table to say, what about the baby? Where's the baby in all this? We get shot down. We had plenty of testimony. People talked about plenty of things. And for me, this bill promotes the death of the unborn baby and doesn't try to save the baby at all. And so, as disappointed, and truly, I'm just flabbergasted that we can talk about being a pro-choice state and a free state for all, and being a healthcare worker, that this bill would only put 1 patient to be stabilized. And the one that can't speak for itself and is the most vulnerable is discarded like trash. Vote no on this bill.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Coming up in strong opposition to this bill for many reasons. We do have the re-engrossed version on your desk if you want to follow along. But this has some very concerning aspects, and as we heard in the vigorous debate yesterday, we are going to pick when we want to follow federal, and we're going to pick when we want to follow state. And I do recognize that the state can go above what the federal wants, but it seems very, we're going to pick it when we want it, but we're not going to use it if we don't. So we're going to follow the federal to some standards, but then we're going to set our own state standards and say that we're actually going to codify both. And for the points that we are regulating and matching both, it is duplicative. Why are we having to put more things on the book, add more burdensome government over-regulations to our systems, our departments, possible civil litigations, because when you do have things that are close enough to be duplicative, but not quite close enough that it adds some gray line aspects, I get concerned, especially when it comes to a very sensitive topic, which is emergency medical services. And before I go into that, I would just like to say thank you to all of our providers in Colorado for all of the service you provide, both in emergencies and in not. You are duly recognized, and we respect and we admire the work that you do. So if we look at the first page of this bill, it says that the bill requires the emergency department to input into a central log whether the person refused treatment or was denied treatment, or whether the person was admitted and treated, stabilized, transferred, or discharged. Yes, that is matching both state and federal. The issues that we then get into, though, is this is adding in as an emergency medical service, abortion and sterilization. Now the state is going above the scope of federal, which we can do because we recognize Colorado does value death over life many a times. And I have huge grievances with that, especially when it comes to emergency services. This bill prohibits an emergency department from denying or discriminating in providing emergency medical services to a patient because of certain characteristics. Again, we all value that. That is correct. Except now we're going to say to our hospitals, you have to offer abortion and sterilization. And now we can get into discriminatory because First Amendment rights, religious rights. We are now on a very gray line of when does a patient get to choose, a mother, over what the state thinks is better. And looking at this, it very much is discerning that it is saying, right, let's see, let me find it. On page 2, leading into page 3, in the absence of a request, a facility shall provide emergency medical services to a person if a prudent lay person would believe, based on the person's appearance or behavior, that the person is in need of emergency medical services. So if the expecting mother cannot give consent, it is now up to the provider to make that choice on whether they abort that child or not, or they sterilize the mother. That is a huge thing to put on somebody. That right there is why I have a grievance as well. We did try to offer an advanced medical directive. We have those already for do not resuscitate and for no blood transfers. That is something in the state and the federal we recognize. That is something we all agree on. So when we're trying to expand the scope, though, this is where we pick what we want or we don't want. We're not going to allow the mother, a woman, to have her full right to say, I want an advance directive that we shall not abort my child in a situation where she's traveling alone on a highway, she gets in a wreck, she doesn't have any ID on her, so now it's up to the provider to decide what to do with the child. If she had that advance directive, we can know without any doubt that she wants to protect her child. Now, because we say we don't want that as a state, we are leaving it up to the provider. Now, this bill also creates, and this is where it gets very concerning, that because we value financial over life, that this bill does offer for a patient to do grievances depending on what emergency medical services were provided to them. This puts our hospitals up for a lot of litigation. If in the real time a provider decides that they're going to abort the child without the mother's consent, without a guardian's consent, if that mother's under 18, without an emergency contact and they're acting in real time, you now are opening it up to a lot of litigation. Not only are we going against, possible First Amendment because of religious beliefs, because the person wants, they no longer in the state, we're not going to recognize an advance directive. We're also going to put the burden on the emergency medical provider to do something in this state that goes beyond the scope, I think, of what abortion that the people voted on. This goes in emergency situations. Oftentimes, that woman could be in second or third trimester, and we're looking at a baby's life as well. But we did not put that in this bill, that we're going to protect both patients. We're only protecting one because we failed to recognize the life of another, and that's discerning. It's also very discerning that it's saying, that we have to provide, if they're equipped, at any emergency medical service hospital facility has to provide these services now. You look at rural Colorado where we don't have OB units, and they very much try not to help women in labor give birth unless it's a dire situation because they're not equipped for it. They can in situations, but they always try to reroute them somewhere else for situations better equipped. And what I mean by that is they wouldn't have the pediatric care. They don't have the little masks and the baby-sized equipment that is needed. They are very much operating in a very dire situation. The way this bill reads, though, because they can't offer that, and a woman presents herself in a situation that is needed, are we now saying our hospitals that are barely surviving to be equipped to give OB unit care, they're now having to expand that scope even farther to allow for sterilization and abortion? This, to me, is opening up for a lot of litigations, a lot of excess burden and red tape on our hospitals, our safety net providers, something that we've heard countless times that we are losing in the state across the spectrum of services. So I very much just want us to pause and see, what are we going to do? Are we going to be chasing out more health care because we're adding in other things? It is so much litigation possibilities here. And it really is not the will of the patient, because an advance directive is the patient's care. This bill puts it on the provider to make that decision. But in this building, we preach all the time of woman's choice. People first, patients first. Until it comes to this, and now we're going to say that they are going to have to make that choice for them because we don't have an advance directive. This is what's concerning to me. There are many other things concerning, but let's just take a stop on this for a second. I know I see the co-sponsors list. We can probably safely assume how this is going to go, but let's put a stop on how this is going to hurt our safety net providers, the crux of possible civil litigations we're going to face, and think about, we are matching federal and state law until we don't want to, and we're going to create our own. There are huge issues with this bill. Colleagues, I strongly urge you use the red button.
Representative Kelty.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And wow, that's going to be hard to follow there. And I want everyone to understand, both of my colleagues that were just up here, both my Republican colleagues were spot on, 100% spot on. You know, in the state of Colorado, we talk about options, but yet now we're passing a bill that's actually going to take away options from a mother in one of the most extreme times in her life, when she's her most vulnerable and actually sometimes unconscious. For me, as you can tell, I'm against this bill, but it seems like it's a bill about population control or something to that. I can't wrap my head around why anyone would want to take away the choice of a mother. We talk about choices all the time. We put choice, we enshrined it into the Constitution, but now we're going to do just the opposite of that with this bill. A mother chooses to protect her baby above herself. A good mother does. That's why they're called mama bears. That's what we do. Come after our kids, we got a problem with that. I don't want to take this bill personal, but I kind of do a little bit. I was that choice. My mother chose to give up her life for mine. Sorry. Oh, sit down, sit down. She didn't choose just once. She chose twice. She knew it was dangerous to have a child, but she so wanted another. And there I came. She was unable to have it naturally. So of course, because my sister was C-section, I was going to be the same. She died on the table trying to have me. Well, we both did. We were both declared dead. And she went to a place that was beautiful and warm. A place she couldn't hardly describe other than like Hawaii, she would say. And she was given a choice up there to stay. And because she was a good mother, she gave up that choice to come back down to here, to have me. She said, she said to whoever it was that she was talking to, she goes, I'm a little busy down there. I'm having a baby, and I want to make sure she makes it. And so she came back, and as they were coming to take her to the morgue, they discovered she was alive. She came back. And my father, my family had already been told that she passed, that we both passed. But when they came together to get her, not only was she alive, she was having me naturally, which was something that was impossible to do with her condition. But she did it anyways. A mother will do anything for their child. And she gave up so much for me. And I want to allow other mothers to be able to do the same for their children. To take away a choice from them to sterilize or to force an abortion on them, I couldn't think of anything worse. And, sorry. I wasn't going to get emotional, darn it, I did. And I really feel that this bill will be taking that from people, and I think that we need to vote our conscience on that. I want everyone here. I've worked with you for months now. Please understand, put yourself in the other person's shoes. Understand that a mother will do anything for their child. It is not up to us to make that decision. They need to have that choice where they want to live or die for that child. I know I would die for mine every day. And we need to allow them to be able to do the same. So please, when you vote today, please think of that. I will be voting no. Thank you.
Representative Froelich.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Members, let's think about what this bill does. This is about codifying what happens when a pregnant woman goes to an ER. And not just any ER, but an ER in Colorado, where we have affirmed over and over again that private medical decisions about reproductive care, including abortion, should remain thus. For 40 years, federal law has been in place to confirm that medical professionals need to be able to do what they do best, save lives. Do you know that young women across America with wanted pregnancies are being issued travel advisories? What happens in other states, in Idaho and Texas, for example, when ideology trumps medical best practices? The number of women in Texas who died while pregnant, during labor, or soon after childbirth skyrocketed following the state's 2021 ban on abortion care, far outpacing the slower rise in maternal mortality across the nation at 11%. A new investigation of federal public health data finds that maternal mortality cases in Texas rose by 56%, compared with 11% nationwide during the same time period. Let's do what we have done previously. Let's continue to trust pregnant people, trust women. Let our emergency departments save lives. Please vote yes.
Representative Zokai.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, our current law is dangerously silent on the right to emergency health care. And that means that our current law is also dangerously silent on whether pregnant people experiencing life-threatening medical emergencies can access the full range of care that they need in the ER. And that silence is putting lives at risk. This bill is codifying a very simple value, that emergency rooms should treat patients based on their medical need, not on their gender, not on their income, not on their immigration status. This bill addresses all emergency health care. So yes, it does also cover reproductive health care. And that is because reproductive health care, including abortion health care, is health care. When someone is bleeding, in pain, or in danger of losing their life due to a pregnancy complication, they shouldn't have to worry about whether the emergency room is going to help them, or delay their care, or turn them away. I would like to highlight some of the testimony that we heard in committee. Individual from Denver. After giving birth, I was septic, bleeding, and begging for care, but I was denied care when I needed it most. I should have been able to get emergency care when I needed it. Instead, I was caught in a system more concerned with politics than patients, and I'm still here fighting for our babies and our lives. An individual from Lakewood. I watched my mother nearly bleed to death while pregnant with my brother. If there had been any delay, I would have lost them both. Senate Bill 130 ensures that in an emergency, you receive the life-saving care you need. Individual from Lone Tree. My sister was denied emergency care 3 times because she was in an abusive situation and didn't have an ID or insurance card. When she was finally seen, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. With Senate Bill 130, her outcome could have been different. These things do happen in Colorado. And we know that there are situations in other states that are more dire. We've all heard the stories of women miscarrying in a hospital bathroom, patients forced to wait until their condition becomes life-threatening enough to get treatment, doctors paralyzed by legal confusion and not knowing how and when they can best treat their patients. And this bill is saying we are not going to allow for that in Colorado. This bill affirms that if you walk into an emergency room with a pregnancy-related emergency, whether that's an ectopic pregnancy, a miscarriage, a hypertensive crisis, or labor that's threatening your life, you are entitled to the care that you need, including abortion, if that's what you choose. And we will always protect the right to choose, and we're asking you to join us.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 130 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Byrd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Byrd votes yes. Please close the machine. With 42 aye, 21 no, and 2 excused, Senate Bill 130 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Byrd, co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 308.
Senate Bill 308 by Senators Mobley and Kirkmeyer, also Representatives Taggart and Sirota, concerning measures related to certain state medical assistance program federal authorizations and in connection therewith funding services from savings realized from state medical assistance program federal authorizations and making and reducing appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 308 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 308 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Byrd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Byrd votes yes. Please close the machine. With 44 aye, 19 no, and 2 excused, Senate Bill 308 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 286.
Senate Bill 286 by Senators Hendrickson and Snyder, also Representative Byrd, concerning money collected by the state in relation to petroleum products.
Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 286 on third reading and final passage.
The motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 286 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Byrd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Byrd votes yes. Please close the machine. With 43 aye, 20 no, and 2 excused, Senate Bill 286 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 285.
Senate Bill 285 by Senator Roberts, also Representatives Lukens and Soper, concerning updating the fee schedule for the fees paid by retail food establishments.
Madam Majority Leader,
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 285 on third reading and final passage.
the motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 285 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Byrd, how do you vote? Oh. Byrd is excused. Espinoza. Please close the machine. With 45 ayes, 17 no, and 3 excused, Senate Bill 285 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 273.
Senate Bill 273 by Senator Roberts, also Representative Smith and Soper, concerning the retention of blood draws for 14 days for use in investigations.
Madam Majority Leader,
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 273 on third reading and final passage.
the motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 273 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Clifford. Please close the machine. With 53 aye, 9 no, and 3 excused, Senate Bill 273 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 276.
Senate Bill 276 by Senators Gonzalez and Weissman, also Representatives Velasco and Garcia, concerning measures to prevent the violation of the civil rights of persons in Colorado based on immigration status and in connection therewith reducing an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader,
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 276 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Barone.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I did yesterday, I'm not going to move the podium up. Senate Bill 276, obviously I'm against this bill. At its core, this bill disables cooperation between local law enforcement and federal immigration authorities. We should be working with our federal partners. We are still part of the United States of America. Immigration is the law of the land, not the law of the state. Even in cases where serious criminal activity may be involved. By prohibiting sheriffs, police officers, and detention centers from complying with civil immigration detainers, the bill creates blind spots in our justice system if a violent offender or repeat criminal is released into our communities rather than being held for federal authorities in cooperation with an investigation. The consequences could be dire. Public safety should never be sacrificed for political posturing. The bill also undermines accountability in our judicial system by retroactively allowing guilty pleas in petty offenses and traffic misdemeanors to be vacated. This opens the door for manipulation of our court system and undermines finality in legal proceedings, all to create immigration loopholes that reward unlawful presence over lawful conduct. As I said before, this is inviting people to stay here illegally. We should be doing the opposite. SB 276 weakens identification safeguards by repealing affidavit requirements for individuals who are not lawfully present to apply for driver's licenses or in-state tuition. This eliminates even the minimal expectation that applicants are on a pathway to legal status. Why should taxpayers subsidize benefits with no transparency, no verification, and no accountability? Furthermore, this bill imposes severe civil penalties up to $50,000 on government employees who cooperate with federal immigration operations, even in good faith. That money goes right back into the illegal immigration legal defense fund. The penalties would be funneled directly into an immigration legal defense fund, effectively forcing taxpayers to fund the legal defense of those who are unlawfully present in the country with no discretion or oversight. That is an abuse of state dollars and a slap in the face of law-abiding citizens. 276 also places excessive restrictions on schools, hospitals, libraries, and child care centers, prohibiting them from cooperating with federal authorities unless presented with a federal judge's warrant. These are not immigration enforcement agencies, but the bill turns them into protected sanctuaries that hinder law enforcement and sow confusion about compliance with federal law. This is not about protecting constitutional rights. Those already exist for every person in this country. This is about erecting a barrier between Colorado and the federal government. An act that not only invites legal challenges, but actively puts the public at risk by shielding potential dangerous individuals from accountability. In the name of so-called justice, SB 276 encourages selective lawlessness, ties the hands of law enforcement, burdens our public institutions, and undermines the principle that laws should apply equally to all. We must reject this bill to preserve public safety, respect the rule of law, and ensure Colorado remains a place where justice is real, not politically motivated. Again, I come back to the taxpayer money. And I want to repeat again, $577 million that could be used here for citizens of this state, going lawfully through their lives, paying their taxes, trying to make ends meet. Those are the people that are really hurting right now. We must protect our own first. There will be time for compassion. There will be time to help others. Now is not that time. Since 2020, nothing's been the same. People struggle more. I'm sure some of you colleagues are struggling a little bit more than you were before. But there will be time for compassion. Right now is not the time. Immigration will be fixed. I will fight for immigration to be fixed, the immigration process. And I won't quit on that. This is not what we should be focusing on. Focus on fixing the immigration process. That's what we should be focusing on. I would like to see another project like President Ronald Reagan did. As I heard yesterday, I didn't know Representative Ricks did go through the process, and Ronald Reagan did help her out. That her and my wife have something in common. That is great. We should do that again. That's what we should be pushing for, not this. I urge a no vote.
Representative Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I listened to this yesterday. It's different listening to it in your ears because you can I think, hear it a lot more. I do believe that there was a lot of conflating between legal immigrants and illegal immigrants, and I think that there was a post about that as well. So I looked up what most countries do as far as illegal immigration. It said, while some have more lenient or complex policies regarding unauthorized immigration, the general consensus is that entering or remaining in a country without proper authorization is against the law. So I looked up most countries. Japan, absolutely not allowed. Mexico, it's a felony. Greece, you have to be smuggled in. Canada, it's contrary to Immigration and Refugee Protection Acts. And the list went on and on and on. And so then I looked up legal immigration versus illegal immigration. Why do we do it? Why do we not want people just to come in illegally? So first was the rule of law. It follows established laws and procedures ensuring people enter a country through a regulated and controlled process versus bypassing the laws which undermine respect for legal systems and make it harder to manage immigration. 2, national security. And we see this in Colorado. Background checks and vetting processes that help screen for criminal records, terrorism links, and other threats. And that's what we saw. We weren't going against the city of Aurora. Aurora is a great city. I do a lot of shopping in Aurora, great businesses, great restaurants, beautiful city. I have a lot of friends that live in Aurora. But the people in Aurora weren't protected by the gangs that overtook apartment complexes and threatened the very great businesses that are established in Aurora. That's what we were fighting against. We were fighting against these people that didn't come through background checks and criminal records. And we're going against the good people of Aurora, Colorado. Versus illegal. Harder for authorities to know who is entering the country. Well, we're seeing that play out really well in our state. Security risks. Economic impact. Clear work authorizations that contribute to the tax base more easily versus having to work in a shadow economy, which can depress wages in some sectors and complicate labor regulations. 4, access to services. You can access public services, education, and healthcare versus being limited or having no access, which can lead to public health concerns. Legal immigration, pathways to citizenship and integration. Paths to permanent residency or citizenship versus illegal immigration, instability, fear of deportation, and social marginalization. And that's what we've done. That's what we've done to these people. And let's look up healthcare. What happens in other states if a U.S. citizen wants to illegally go to another country? What happens in Canada? No, an undocumented American cannot access free healthcare in Canada. Canada's publicly funded healthcare system, known as Medicare, is available to Canadian citizens, primary or permanent residents, and certain eligible temporary residents. Visitors, including undocumented individuals, are not covered by provincial or territorial health insurance plans, would be required to pay for medical services out of pocket. In emergency situations, hospitals in Canada are obligated to provide care, but visitors without insurance will be billed for services rendered. The costs can be substantial. For instance, a 24-hour hospital stay may cost between Canadian $3,000 and $6,000. It is strongly recommended that visitors obtain private travel medical insurance before arriving in Canada. Japan. You're not getting anything in Japan. Undocumented individuals are not eligible for these programs, can't enroll in them. Emergency medical treatment is provided to undocumented individuals. They are required to pay the full cost of services up front. No undocumented U.S. citizen can, and then in Mexico, no an undocumented U.S. citizen in Mexico cannot access free health care in Mexico. Their program provides comprehensive health care to employees and legal residents. It is not available to tourists or individuals without legal residency status. While hospitals in Mexico are required to provide emergency care regardless of residency status, they typically require upfront payment for services. Without health insurance or sufficient funds, individuals may face significant medical bills. And let's go to Sweden, one of the most kind of liberal, socialized place. Emergency care. Undocumented individuals can access emergency medical care, but they will be charged the full cost unless they can demonstrate financial hardship. So no other country would allow any of us to go there and get anything for free. So let's talk about this bill. massive taxpayer burden. An estimated $544 million annually is being spent by Colorado taxpayers to fund services for illegal immigrants. We're not talking about the legal immigrants that are the bedrock of our society, including K through 12 and higher education, healthcare, driver's licenses, legal defense, and integration programs. And let's talk about the 5 young men who work with us. I'm not going to say for us because they are family to us. They work with us. They legally immigrated here from Mexico. They spend Christmases with us. One of these gentlemen makes about $80,000 working with us. He came here legally. The best day of his life was getting his citizenship in the United States. He has been a staunch Democrat his whole life. He voted for Trump this year because people have cut him in line. He came here. He followed the rules. He waited in the line. He did things legally, and now he is paying the burden of illegal immigration. That is wrong, and that is not just for the legal immigrants that came here, did the paperwork, did the background checks, and did everything right. The woman who does my nails, Vietnamese legal immigrant, came here, did the paperwork, went through the processes, and now she's being cut in line. Spent the money, raised the money, came here legally because that's the rules that we're supposed to follow, and she's being cut in line. And they're done. The legal immigrants of our state are done. They're paying into this after being cut in line, and they're done. You want to know why there was a massive election this year? Because these are the people that are done. They've had enough. The legal immigrants of our state didn't sign up for this. They did everything they were supposed to do, and they were cut in line. And this was not voted on by the taxpayers. It's been forced on by the taxpayers, those struggling to pay their own bills, their own health care costs, their own premiums, their own deductibles. We didn't go to the taxpayers and say, hey, do y'all want to be a sanctuary state? No. They were bussed in, flown in, on the backs of the taxpayers. Projected increases in K through 12 higher education and healthcare costs will strain state budgets even further, especially if federal funding is cut. It's just when federal funding is cut. It's going to be cut. New programs like HB 22-1289 and HB 25-1297 further raise fees on Colorado families and divert taxpayer funds towards services for illegal immigrants. Healthcare costs are rising sharply with OmniSalud growing 26% in 1 year. Funding for illegal immigrants' health care when legal immigrants are struggling to pay their own bills. 57 million to 73 million. Future health care costs are expected to exceed 100 million annually. And they come in to Health and Human Services. Now we're going to borrow from the Unclaimed Property Trust Fund, painting ourselves into a corner while Coloradans are struggling to pay for basic necessities. Legal immigrants are struggling to pay. Education costs are surging with 24,000 undocumented students costing $352 million annually, expected to rise if current trends continue. Kids can't even read and write at grade level. Economic harm to Coloradans. The Health Insurance Affordability Enterprise bill raises premiums by $800 to $1,200 per family. Per family.
55 seconds, Representative.
Thank you. While siphoning up to 40% of funds to cover illegal immigrants, driving up costs for everyone. Enterprises are being used to bypass Tabor and raise $67 million in new fees without voter approval, breaking Colorado's trust. This bill incentivizes illegal immigration, increases financial burdens on taxpayers, weakens public safety, and undermines Colorado's trust in their government. It is a reckless expansion of failed policies that Colorado cannot afford, and the people of Colorado are adamantly against. Vote no on this bill.
Representative Zokai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. My mother fled Iran, leaving behind her belongings. She arrived here with nothing. She slept on a mattress on a floor of an apartment that was infested. She learned a new language. She worked multiple jobs. And she watched from a distance as the home she once knew was torn apart by a violent revolution, and slowly realized that she did not have a home to go back to. My mother is America. And so when I think about this bill, I of course think about who it was written to help. I think about my parents and others like them, people who are fleeing from violent circumstances, people who have made the impossible decision to leave behind everything they know in the hopes of making a better life in a new place. When I think of who this bill is meant to help, I can't help but think of my own experience, entering school, not speaking English, and wondering how I would have defended myself in court. Colleagues, we can't pretend that we are legislating in a vacuum. And one of the reasons why I appreciate this bill so much is that it is one of few that is really taking seriously the crisis that the federal administration poses for immigrants in particular and for marginalized people generally. Lawful residents are being falsely equated with violent criminals, even though we know that members of this community are substantially more likely to be victims of crime. People are being taken to a foreign prison where they are subject to torture and lifelong confinement. Students are being unlawfully detained for exercising their First Amendment rights. The president and his administration have openly mused about deporting US-born citizens. And as we saw with the reckless operation conducted in Colorado Springs earlier this week, for the first time ever, federal agencies like USPS and the IRS are being deputized by this administration to indiscriminately arrest Coloradans. We have repeatedly seen video footage of ICE agents and other immigration authorities refusing constitutionally protected demands to see a judicial warrant, and instead kidnapping residents of our state with no explanation or legal basis. In Larimer County, just south of my district, there was a video sent to me of a lawyer repeatedly asking ICE agents why they were trying to detain a father while he was trying to drop his kid off at school. And the agents ignored her, dragged the man out of his car, and sent him to a detention center. And that attorney did not get information about where that individual was. I have received calls saying that there are kids in school without parents to go home to. My 8-year-old asked me which of his friends are allowed to stay here. And I have heard from members of the Middle Eastern community across this state who are living in fear every day because they know that we're being targeted too. I stand today to support this bill to ensure that our resources are not wasted on cooperating with unconstitutional practices. I am so proud to be a daughter of immigrants. I am so proud of our immigrant community that is persevering through the attack on their very civil rights. And I am so proud of this bill and of the sponsors for giving all of us a chance to uphold due process and justice. And I hope that you will join me in standing up for all Coloradans and vote yes today.
Representative Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, and thank you to my colleague from Larimer. I appreciate that speech. And that is honestly a good reason why I do not oftentimes come here with prepared notes, because I want to have the opportunity to be able to listen to what is being said before me and to be able to respond to the conversation as it is developing. My thoughts on this started yesterday, listening to the bill sponsors, to the introduction, and about the difficulty, about the 20 years, I believe, was the length of time that it took to be able to gain citizenship. 15 years for a colleague of mine from South Africa, via Loveland. And that's not okay. That's not right. It should be much easier to naturalize, to become a legal citizen of this country. I have and I will remain a supporter, strong supporter, of an expedited process for those that wish to come here legally, that wish to come here to make a better life for themselves. That was an amazing story. That story right there is exactly why we should have that expedited process, and we should continue to support those efforts. We should continue to support those that are fleeing a political persecution or whatever it is, a war-torn country, that they are seeking to come to this country for a better life. Hallelujah. Absolutely. We should make it easier in those cases. This is where it becomes difficult for me personally. I believe it's safe to say that I believe that it becomes difficult for those on the side of the aisle. It's because the previous administration convoluted this conversation beyond recognition. When the borders were opened, freely opened, and we had millions pouring in unvetted across the border, those were not entirely, I'm going to say some, perhaps some, were coming here for a better life. They were coming here with their children to find a better life. Not everybody that came across during that time fit into one category or to one classification. I don't think that anybody would say that. However, we do know that there were plenty of those that were coming across unvetted, unchecked, freely coming across, that were human traffickers, drug cartel, sex traffickers, gun dealers, violent gang members, those that had previously been imprisoned, freely coming across our borders. That's a problem, because those folks do not belong in the conversation that was just had here. Those folks do not deserve in any way whatsoever to be given any of that emotional latitude, because they're coming here to damage this country. They're coming here to further their criminal enterprises. They do not deserve to be cried for. They do not deserve the misappropriation of emotion of this conversation. And they don't deserve our tax money. They don't deserve our $500 million of your tax money that you didn't say was okay or you didn't vote to support. Colorado is a sanctuary state. I don't care if the governor refuses to actually say the words. The 8 pieces of legislation that have been passed since 2018 makes Colorado a sanctuary state. Denver is a sanctuary city. Castle Rock, which I was proud to serve as a member of town council We investigated a lawsuit against the city of Denver for their sanctuary policies. If you remember, Denver decided that they wanted to defund their police. They wanted to defund every single department to be able to carve out $90 million for their asylum seekers program. That made
To the bill,
Denver
Bob.
a sanctuary city.
Back to the bill, please.
This is supersizing, yes, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, this is supersizing Colorado as a sanctuary state. This bill is supersizing sanctuary state policies. Nobody voted for this. Nobody said that it was okay to divert the hard-earned money from hardworking families of Colorado to pay for those that are coming here and wish to do us harm. That's not all of them. And I understand that. And I am not trying to lump everything, everybody, every immigrant into one category because that is unfair. I would not do that. There are plenty of stories, as described by the representative from Larimer County, of those that seek to come here for a better life. Unfortunately, there are violent gang members that hide amongst that group. And we cry for them? I will not. We fund them? I don't think we should. This is supersizing sanctuary policy. This is diverting money from the hard-working families of Colorado to fund those policies. As much as I am trying to separate out the conversation, I would appreciate a little effort doing the same thing on the other side. We can't just lump everything into one ball of emotion and give a couple of stories.
And Rep. Brooks, I've given wide latitude to both sides, so please continue to speak to the bill.
Yes, sir. I believe that when we consider this bill, we ought to be looking at the downsides, not just the emotional stories to be able to support it, but look at what could potentially be the harm. What could potentially be the downstream negative impact? Too often in this chamber, too often in this house of the people, I believe that we focus on just the emotional side and we don't think about or consider the long-term impacts. I'm asking you to do that. I'm asking you to consider that amongst the legal or those that wish to become, that wish to go through a process that hopefully one day we can expedite, that those that wish to become a legal immigrant, that there are plenty of those that do not. There are plenty of those that have no intent to do so. Got to recognize that. And we've got to recognize that a bill like this protects them as much as it does for those that wish to come here and contribute to our society. If we can weed that out, and I know that's a cake that we probably cannot unbake, but if we could weed that out, then I'd absolutely be in support of being able to bring those here that wish to naturalize and be a legal citizen. The rest of them,
45 seconds, sir.
don't let the door hit you or the good Lord split you. You got to go. Vote no.
Representative Hamrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. As a longstanding teacher in a very diverse area of Aurora, the all-American city, the world in a city, I stand in strong support of this bill. I stand with my immigrant students and families from all over the world. The immigrant stories I have heard from my kids, and I call them my kids because they'll always be my kids, I have thousands of kids, would melt even the coldest heart. As a teacher, I wrote scores of letters of recommendations for my students from all over the world and heard about their family's reason for immigrating and how, despite the hardship, they're dedicated to working hard and achieving the American dream. Over my decades of teaching, my immigrant students were the most resilient and hardworking of all. These battle-forged, resilient, bilingual students are primed to be major assets in our community as they were in the school and leaders in our country. Ask any teacher in the metro area, and you'll find that many of our top students come from mixed status families who had to scrape and claw to get here. At my school, most recently, our valedictorians came from Ghana, Eritrea, Colombia, El Salvador, Iran, Mexico, Iraq. Unfortunately, the current national climate of hate and cruelty is causing a crisis in our schools. Schools should be a safe place for our students to learn and thrive. Instead, there's anxiety and fear of an uncertain future. Millions of our students live in mixed status homes, homes filled with fear and dread. This is not America. Public education is for all. It's a right, and this bill will ensure that Colorado's immigrant students will be able to feel safe going to school and learning and feel confident of a safe and secure future. Today, I am a proud Coloradan who stands with my immigrant students and families and my fellow teachers in strong support of this critical bill. America's greatness comes from our diversity. Be on the right side of history. I urge an aye vote.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and colleagues. I didn't speak to the bill yesterday. There were amendments that I was hoping we could make to make this a better bill. And as I speak today, I'm going to try to stay away from any euphemisms or mixing or lumping together of folks. When I'm speaking at all of folks that were not born in this country in relation to this bill, I'm talking about people whose first act upon taking residency in our nation was to break our nation's laws, not those that are coming through legal processes and attempting to get citizenship, but those who broke our laws and those that continue to break our laws. I oppose this bill. And again, I think I may have mentioned in another yesterday that I generally say that I believe the sponsors of most of the bills that come forward, or all the bills that come forward, are well-intentioned. But I've also learned over the last 100+ days that we're not supposed to look at the intentions or impugn motivation, but just look at the bill. So, to the bill itself, from my point of view, from the district I represent, it sends the wrong message. It imposes the wrong priorities, and it sets the wrong policy for the people of Colorado, all of them, but most especially our rural communities and the working families that are already being asked to do so much more with so much less. At its core, Senate Bill 25-276 undermines the rule of law. And I know there's been a lot said today about what's happening nationally in other states and around places that are not Colorado. But here in Colorado, it undermines the rule of law, and that's a dangerous path to go down. We don't like federal law, we violate it in Colorado. Our counties and municipalities don't like Colorado law, they violate it in their towns and municipalities. Individuals don't like the laws, they break them. This is a bad, bad path to be on. This bill prohibits cooperation between local governments, law enforcement, and federal immigration authorities. It says that we do not trust our own law enforcement to do the right thing when confronted with very serious issues, and imposes our will on them in a way that ties their hands and prevents them from doing what is right in an individual situation. It imposes new legal risks on public servants and puts up significant barriers to coordination with those that are trying to stop threats to public safety against all Coloradans. I don't think this is even public policy. At this point, it's political insulation for those that have broken our laws. And there's going to be costs, and not just financial, not just legal, but again, in the very fabric of our societies. Just yesterday, we learned the federal government's filed a lawsuit against the state of Colorado over sanctuary policies that were already on the books. Now, I joined to sponsor in the House a Senate bill that would have reversed many of the policies that this lawsuit is based on. And that bill failed. It didn't get out of the Senate committee. So now what? Well, now we have 276. We're already being sued, and now we have a bill that doubles down on those same policies. It expands them, it codifies them, and in doing so, it risks triggering even broader legal action and the loss of significant federal funding that's tied to public safety, law enforcement, our schools, our roads, medical care for all. We are endangering the lives of all of our citizens, all of the residents of Colorado, because we're trying to find a way to protect those that started their residency in this nation by breaking the law. This isn't theoretical. It's happening now. Denver's already lost $24 million, or they haven't lost it, I guess, depending on how you read the articles. They're not going to get reimbursement, but they spent money that they expected to be reimbursed that now will have to come out of other spending and other priorities. Federal government's clearly watching us, and Colorado may soon be on the hook for choosing defiance over partnership. And our taxpayers are the ones that are going to pay the price. You know, a lot of folks have stood up here and said this is our moment. This is not a great civil rights moment. It's a moment where we choose whether we're going to support our own citizens over those who, again, broke the law as their first act of residency. And we're already paying in other ways, and it has been stated. Colorado taxpayers are shouldering the cost of services to individuals who are here unlawfully. And the numbers are staggering and hard to pin down. But it looks like we've spent about $340 million in K-12 funding last year to educate students who are in the country illegally. They're kids. It's not their fault. But we're a magnet, and we're drawing people in illegally, and there's a cost. We celebrated wildly last year that we had closed the budget stabilization gap, that we had found $500 million to finally pay into our schools the amount that our formula said the schools should get. $500 million, but 340 of it's going to folks that should not have been here. And again, kids, it's not their fault. But parents made a decision, and every parent wants a better life for their kids. But you could make the case that people that are robbing banks, stealing cars, stealing catalytic converters are doing so to make a living and help their kids. We should not make illegality something that we frown upon in one area and celebrate in another. But here we are, considering a bill that will attract even more illegal aliens to Colorado. While our hospitals are stretched thin, our road projects are delayed, our roads are falling apart, our schools are stressed. We got water projects that continue to get pushed off year after year after year on the Eastern Plains. Our public resources are not infinite. That is absolutely clear. But policies like this stretch them even further. And again, not for Coloradans who followed the law, but for those that are being shielded from it. Reasonable amendments were offered. Good faith efforts to ensure we could still coordinate appropriately with federal agencies. Denied. Amendments to ensure we could still receive mutual aid through National Guard coordination during wildfires and natural disasters were offered. Those were denied. Even a very simple amendment, one sentence, that would have kept this legislature in a position to oversee appropriations, which is our job, was denied. All of them were rejected. And now the bill even includes, or still includes, language that limits the ability of military forces from other states to train in support of our national defense. In order to protect against what a sponsor admitted was a concern that a governor of Texas was a threat to the sovereignty of our state. I mean, we've heard more about Texas in the last 2 days in the Colorado legislature than I ever would have guessed. The language in this bill risks complicating emergency response, wildfire support, natural disaster coordination, and these are all things that rural Colorado depends on. We're not legislating in the public interest with this bill. We're legislating from a place of politics, not good policy. And that is-
Representative Richardson, you do have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. The people I represent don't want more bureaucracy, more lawsuits, or more invitations to lose federal support. They want functioning hospitals. They want safe roads. They want clean water. They want strong schools and a government that respects their hard work and their tax dollars and expects services to be returned to them, not others that are here illegally. But perhaps the worst of it, the bill places those who broke the laws by entering our nation illegally ahead of our own citizens. We can have compassion, but we should not be drawing into our state more and more people that drain the precious few resources we have. And we're risking a tremendous amount of federal dollars, and we may be one of those.
Representative Richardson, your time has expired.
Thank you, ma'am. Please vote no.
Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Having read and read and read this bill and engaged with it from a law enforcement perspective with the chiefs, conversations with sheriffs, looking at what this bill intends to do, I fundamentally disagree that this bill has anything to do with violating the law. This is about protecting civil rights for people. It is about protecting our state from lawsuits. It's about keeping our peace officers out of situations that they're not responsible for. Title VIII of the United States Code, where this immigration law comes from, is mostly civil. There are a few crimes in Title VIII. They are things like crossing a border illegally. They are things like fraudulently giving information at a border in order to gain entry into the country. They are like re-entry into the country illegally. None of which are Colorado peace officers trained, knowledgeable, engaged, or responsible for enforcing. In fact, if an immigrant walked up to a police officer and said, "I climbed the fence at the border and came in," that utterance alone would not be preponderance of evidence to give that police officer any authority whatsoever to make an arrest, nor do they have a court in this state that they can write that charge into, nor are they charged with enforcing that crime. And my relationship to this is the same as if Governor Polis came out today and said, you know, we've got this issue where the campers at Chatfield or in our state parks are not dropping their ticket in the box, and they're not following our civil law. So I am directing all of the law enforcement officers in this state that they must now enforce this law. And if they don't, we're going to cut off any state funding to police officers for every police officer in this state until you do. And I assure you, in that moment, we would start having conversations about home rule authority. And we would start hearing from the Colorado chiefs of the police, you can't tell us that we have to go to the state park and enforce the campers. the sheriffs would be like, no, 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 that you have no authority to do that, and you know better. And that is similar to what we're dealing with here. We've got an administration in the federal government that has just decided that things are law that are not. He can go to Congress and he can ask them to change the law to make it be a crime, a criminal element to be in this country instead of a civil infraction. And that would be enforceable by the federal government at that point. That is an option on the table. That is not what they are doing. They are asking our peace officers to violate people's civil rights. They are creating something that is a massively gray area, and this law makes sure that we keep it black and white. Just because the federal administration starts to tell you that you are to start to enforce something civilly, please do not take it upon yourself, police officers in this state, to go start to enforce who can go in or out of a post office or when. Please do not find other civil matters in the federal code. Please do not send your cops to engage with somebody about whether they have filed their tax return on time or any other civil matter of the United States. You do not have that authority. Peace officers of this state should start right where they get their powers. It starts in 16.2.5 of the Colorado statutes. And I said this yesterday on Seconds, and I'll say it again. It says, shall enforce the laws of the state of Colorado, and then it's usually followed with something like, and must be post-certified. We define your power as a peace officer, one at a time, delineated in very clear form in 16.2.5. And nowhere there does it say, and by the way, if you'd like to enforce something in Title 8 USC that's civil, you may. That's not your job. It's not the job of the Severance Police Department to be engaged with people about their status in this country. They can, they can know about it. Now let me also be clear about something else. It is their job to enforce the law. If anyone commits a crime, regardless of whether they are an immigrant, regardless of whether they are a U.S. citizen, regardless of whether they've come here legally, regardless of whether they did not come here legally, it does not matter if you violate the law. If you commit a crime in the state of Colorado, you should be prosecuted. If you are in this state and you commit a crime, including something that might be a civil infraction like you drive too fast in front of a speeding camera, you should pay that fine. If you join a gang and shoot at someone, we are going to prosecute you no matter who you are or where you came from, and that is what we are supposed to do. But the Sheriff's Department in Arapahoe County is not responsible at all for whether or not you water your lawn or some other civil infraction. And I'm disturbed that everybody keeps just ignoring that the federal government made these civil infractions, and they made them civil infractions for a reason. And everyone in this country has due process. And just this morning, I covered my heart when I said, liberty and justice for all. That's everybody here. It's not just the ones we want to have it. There's nothing in the Bill of Rights that delineates a person, but not these people. A person, but not this person that the president doesn't like. A person, but not this person that did this thing. A person, but not that person. It says our rights are for the people. It does not say for a citizen. Very intentionally and time again, it uses the word person, and over and over and over, our Supreme Court of the United States has upheld that. And let me say one more thing about lawsuits. To this date, the state of Colorado hasn't lost a lawsuit on this issue. And we've been there before. Colorado versus United States Department of Justice on this very issue went all the way through the appeals court, and we won that, and we got our money. So I can't legislate, and I'm not going to be threatened to legislate, and I'm not going to engage with the lawfulness of my legislation based on a threat from someone who is violating the law.
Mr. Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So my comments will be about the bill, but I guess indirectly. But first, I want to start out and say what I really feel about this whole issue is we're all being played, really. This is great fundraising, and this is great TV news because it keeps us divided on this issue instead of just fixing it at the federal level. I think for the longest time, we've just been kicking the can down the road because it's great for fundraising. It's great for news. It grabs headlines.
And you mean that in a bipartisan sense?
Yes.
Great, thank you, sir.
That's what I said. I said all of us are being.
Very good.
This is, I mean, and I know this is a greater problem than what we can actually fix here because we all know really to fix it is at the federal level. But look at the time we're spending on doing this when it doesn't matter what administration, Republican or Democrat, has played this game. I mean, they called Obama the deporter-in-chief. You remember that? I think he had deported more people than both Bushes together. But we pick on each other and we beat the heck out of each other in states like this when the federal government should step in and do their damn job and fix the problem. So I want to start with that first and foremost before we get into this debate, so I can level set with everybody, because unfortunately in this political game that goes on, then it's you don't care about people because you said this. So I want to make it clear I care about people. My family were immigrants, but I want to level set before I even talk about this bill so you all know where my heart is and where I come from. When I'm out in my communities talking to my people, this is the perception they get from this chamber. They're getting up every day, they're working their tails off, they're juggling their kids, they're eating unhealthy, they're burning the candle at both ends. The cost of high inflation in Colorado, the cost of housing, the cost of health care is crushing them. It's crushing them. We hear it all the time in here. We hear it in committee all the time. So when they see a piece of legislation like this, no matter how well-intended it may be from the sponsors, it looks like to them that they're coming in second. That all these things are going on and they can't afford to pay for health care, but somebody will come into this state and get health care. I'm somebody that both of my daughters have had health problems from the time they were born, and I don't know what I would own if I didn't have to pay for medical bills. But it's disheartening to think that after all that money I paid, somebody can come in here today and be able to get health care or get something when my life was hard. And I'm not saying Coloradans want it easy because, first of all, to live in the West, you have to be tough in the first place. It took tough people to settle this country, and I think Coloradans have a tough spirit. But when you're constantly trying to strive and get ahead and move forward, and like my family, 4 generations, and you could get a tiny little bit of help or a tiny little bit of relief, and the state could do it, we are sending and diverting funds and money to take care of people that they consider have no skin in the game. It isn't that they don't care about these people. They just want to know while their lives get harder, they have to watch dollars go to people. You could not give a cup from empty. So I had a constituent tell me this story. This is the most layman's terms that I've heard about this whole thing. You have a family. And this was told to me, honest as I could be on the campaign trail this last year. You have a family of your own. You can only afford a certain amount of groceries for that family. So you cook all day, you put the food on the table, and then you invite the neighbor kids to come over and eat while your family stands and watches them. From a constituent. That's how they relate what is happening in this state. And these are people that are people of immigrants. They came to this, but they just don't understand why, as their lives are so hard, why are we working so hard to take care of other people. And I don't think that that's harsh, or I don't think that that's being mean. And I don't think that makes them a racist. And I don't think it's comparable to some of the biggest atrocities in the world. They just want to know is they get up every day and they eat unhealthy and they're dying of strokes and they're dying of heart attacks and they're burning the candle at both ends and they're trying to raise kids and everything is crushing them. Why do they have to sit back when the state could say, you want to know what? We've got this many families that have a sick kid in this state. We're going to take this however $1 million and divide it up and make sure they're taken care of. And then it turns into a, you're a racist, you're a... I mean, I watch people in here, we've got Avalanche jerseys on in here. To say that people shouldn't be tribalistic in a sense is wrong, because that's human nature. I mean, we watch people beat the hell out of each other after basketball games and football games, and what you have Americans saying and Coloradans saying is hey, we want to help from people. You can't give from a cup that's empty. Why not us? It would be different if it was everybody was just sitting around not working, there was a surplus of money. I think the hearts of Americans, my heart is I would give as much as I could if I had the ability to give more. And I think we've lost the spirit of America that way. But why can't we take care of ours first? Why, when all this started, where there were people being put up in hotels and they were stepping over homeless veterans on drugs? I mean, come on. I mean, I'm trying to talk common sense, and you all know me. I try to be very common sense-like. I mean, in what world do you take somebody that has served their country, they are sleeping on a sidewalk, and there are people not from here walking into a hotel around them? I just don't understand. We need to fix this at the federal level. I was showing my good colleague from Denver, AML, a picture. So my mom said, and I'll show any of you after this. So my family came up through the Port of Orleans, and they moved to the Trinidad area for the coal mines. I have his immigration papers. He started the Trinidad Macaroni Factory. I have a picture of the first stock of the company. I showed ML Duran. This man is standing in front of his building, and it is American flags everywhere. Everywhere. It wasn't Italian flags everywhere. It was American flags everywhere because he moved to this country to be part of the fabric of this country, but not change the fabric of this country. To weave his story into the American dream. We still do Italian things in my family, but we're Americans first. And then we see protests, and they're not American flags. And I'm thinking to myself, you love this country enough that you're waving to the flag of the country that you ran away from. I mean, what kind of trust does that give us that look at that flag and revere it, and some people don't here, and that's fine. I'm not saying this country's been perfect forever, but literally, like, you have people that are saying, I ran away from these places because they're horrible, and then when I protest your government, I'm going to wave their flag. That is the most, to me, I don't even know where common sense that even makes sense. So then Americans are sitting looking at this going, okay, we've been a country that's always helped. We've been a country that wants to help. And then you're fleeing from these places, and then you're coming here and flying the flag of the places that you fled from. And you sit back and you go, okay, we want you here. You want help. I don't know. I don't know. I'm tired of the politics of this. I think what states should start doing is uniting in a voice, both Republicans and the Democrats, and writing letters. Every state in this country should be writing a letter, and it should have been done 30 years ago, to the federal government saying, get off your tails and fix the problems. But it don't make for good news, and it don't make for money during campaign season. And we talk about the man all the time in here, and the man is dividing us and holding us down based off of stuff like this. When we agree on 80% of these things. But guess what? They throw the little pieces in like red meat, and what do? Like a bunch of dogs, we beat the heck out of each other. Is it benefiting the people trying to get here? Is it benefiting the people of Colorado? No. We're standing up here talking about this when we really can't even fix this here. This is to make people feel good in all reality. No disrespect, but it's another safety blanket at night so somebody can go to bed and feel like they've really been saved. And that's, to me, disingenuous in itself because this really doesn't solve the crux of the issue.
1 minute, sir.
I'll always be bare bones and honest with you. Once again, put down the swords. Let's work together and fix the problem. Let's let Americans know we care about them. Let's let Coloradans know we care about them. Let's quit killing our industries. Let's unleash the prosperity of the state and this country. Let's fill the cup and give again. This is the greatest place on earth. The greatest place on earth. And I'm honored to live here. I'm honored to be a kid of immigrants that come into this country. But there's a way we do this. And if it's too hard for people, let's figure it out instead of tearing each other apart. So today I'm going to ask you to no vote for this, but my colleagues, I urge you all, maybe this summer when we gavel out, let's sit down, put the swords away, and let's try to fix the problem. I think it would be pretty cool to see a letter come out of this state legislator, a bipartisan letter with people you would never see on a letter together saying, the federal government has not done its due diligence. Get your act together and let's fix this.
Thank you. Representative Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you, sir.
Colleagues, as I'm sure it is for everyone, this is a very difficult bill. It's really difficult in the situation I have in Highlands Ranch with so many of my constituents very sympathetic to the issue, but the first time I think I ever had to deal with one of the sponsors on this bill, it was over an immigration bill, and I made very strong the point that I will never support a bill that engages in active interference with the federal government's responsibility to enforce immigration law. But we have absolutely no obligation to put our sovereign police power at the disposal of the federal government. So anything that we put forward that says we will not put that at the disposal of the federal government, I will support. But I won't support anything that deals with active interference. And on the bill we were dealing with at that time, there were parts in the bill that I thought went too far and were dealing with active interference, and I was the only Democrat who voted against it. This bill is different. This bill's title, which we seem to keep overlooking, is Concerning Measures to Prevent the Violation of Civil Rights of Persons in Colorado Based on Immigration Status. We're not talking about funding. We're not talking about all sorts of criminal violations. We're talking about protecting the civil rights of people that are here in the country. And it doesn't matter, they're people, they're in the country. They're covered by the US Constitution. I grew up in a country in America where they used to believe in Blackstone's dictum that it's better to let 10 guilty go free than let one innocent suffer. And it was Benjamin Franklin that increased that ratio to 100 to 1. So when we see mass sweeps, and you say, oh, all these criminals, well, if we've had several million people come up across the border, and 90% of them were criminals and part of some invading army, we would be in deep, deep, dire straits, but that is not happening. There are quite a few bad apples in that group, and we know that. And they're subject to law enforcement actions. But these massive sweeps is violating the basic fundamental principles of this country. And if you can't see that, it's very sad. If the opposition had run an amendment that simply said at a certain felony level, we would honor detainers for those individuals and turn them over, I would support that amendment. But we didn't see that. I supported the amendment to clarify what I did see as vague, the Armed Forces Clause in there, requiring the governor's pre-authorization permission. The two bright lines I told the sponsors from day one that I could not vote for this bill have been corrected. Destroying government records was a bright line with me. They removed that. The vacator issue, they were able to resolve that for me. So I looked for more reasons that I couldn't support this, and I can't. Because at the end of the day, everything in here is just saying the sovereign police authority of the state of Colorado shall not be commandeered and put at the disposal of the federal government to enforce federal immigration law. There is nothing wrong with that. The people on the other side of the aisle, the political winds changed at some point, and there was a federal effort to confiscate all firearms. I would be down here fighting my own party if they wanted to cooperate in that
Marshall,
effort.
let's keep it to the bill, please, sir.
What's that?
Please, to the bill.
I think that is to the bill.
This bill does not contemplate firearm seizure. Please, to the bill.
So the analogy of putting police power of the state for one purpose and not another, you can't pick and choose. We had a party on one side that used to believe in the 10th Amendment. It's still there.
Sir, we will not categorize what other members in this chamber believe or don't believe. Please speak to your own beliefs.
I believe in the 10th Amendment.
Perfect.
I've always believed in the 10th Amendment. I believed in the 10th Amendment when I was a Republican for 30 plus years and went unaffiliated for 4 years before I joined the Democratic Party. I guess there's not much more to say, but that, again, this is a civil rights bill. This is not about funding different segments. This isn't about anything of the sort. This is about defending the civil rights of individuals, and you have to defend the civil rights of people that you don't like, because one day they'll come after people you do like. Thank you.
Minority Leader Puglisi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I am a first-generation American. My father came over from Italy when he was 18 with 50 cents in his pocket and the dream of a better future, like many of the people who are in this room today. I didn't grow up very different than most of you. My father has a big family over in Italy. Only him and his brother came over. And I am the 15th grandchild. And so I have a lot of older cousins. And I had my first baby on the campaign trail of my very first county commissioner campaign. And then my second child, my second year in office, and I needed help. I was a single mom way before my divorce decree was signed. And I have a cousin, she was 26 at the time, and had asked her if she wanted to come to America for a better life. Our family comes from a very rural, small town in Italy where women never would have the opportunities that I was granted in this country. I am eternally grateful to my father for coming here and giving us the life that I would have never had otherwise. And we tried to go through the legal process to get her here, right? She's 26, she has no prospects of a real future in Italy, and I wanted her to have that opportunity. And I needed help. And who better to help than family? And she was denied the first time we went through the process because she wasn't married and she didn't own property at 26 years old. I don't know a lot of American women who are 26 years old who are married and own property, but they denied her. And we appealed that process because I really wanted to give her this opportunity. I thought it was a great opportunity for her. And the appeal was denied. And I tell you that story because what I want to say is I didn't bring her here. I didn't break the laws of this country to bring her here because that is just not who our family was. And she is older now. My little guy is going to be 11. She's still unmarried. She still has no prospects and still does not own property. And she could have been given a better life. And I feel guilty that I wasn't able, no matter what process I went through, to get her here. I do believe that there should be an easier legal path to citizenship for young girls like my cousin who wanted to come here and really wanted to start a better life. And I support that and continue to support that and do believe that is a federal responsibility. Where I am really struggling right now, and I appreciate the bill sponsors, and I'm really trying to understand a couple of things that I've heard over the last 2 days. So there was a comment about this Colorado Springs raid that had happened recently. I represent a portion of Colorado Springs where 105 people have been detained. As reported by the Denver Post, they're detained because of prostitution, drug trafficking, and crimes of violence. And a quote by an activist group, and I heard it mentioned today, which is why I really feel strongly that I need to address it, again, because I'm raising my kids by myself, 2 little kids in Colorado Springs. And someone had said, "We will not sit idly by as our city and county law enforcement collaborate with federal agencies to detain and deport our parents, siblings, partners, and children. When immigrant rights are under attack, we fight back." When do we fight back? When do we protect our children and parents and siblings and partners? And so I'm really struggling with the laws that have consistently been put in place, even since the time I've been a legislature, that put law enforcement at risk, that put children at risk, that put families at risk. I am struggling to understand why we think that's okay. And so my issue with this bill is that I feel that we are not enforcing the rights of the people who are here that want to see violent criminals deported. And I read this yesterday, and I want to read it again because I do think it's important that the governor in the State of the State 2025 said, "To be clear, in Colorado, we have zero tolerance for those who commit crimes, whether they're American citizens or not." I agree. And I truly hope that the President-elect, Trump, and Congress can work together quickly to secure the border, stop human trafficking, and stop the illegal flow of guns and drugs. I agree. As a state, we welcome more federal help to detain and deport dangerous criminals. I agree. I also hope that Congress finally provides legal pathways for citizenships for dreamers and those who seek to come out of the shadows to help make Colorado greater. I also agree. There must be a legal path to citizenship. And so why this bill is so conflicting for me is because we have on one hand a governor who says we welcome more federal help, while at the same time we are looking to pass a law that is the antithesis of more federal help, of deporting criminals, for allowing our law enforcement to work with federal law enforcement in order to deport violent criminals who are hurting our children and families. And so I'm struggling to understand that. And some will say, well, there's nothing in this bill that is going to continue to tie the hands of law enforcement, but I disagree. I think that's exactly what this bill is for. And I don't want to tie the hand of law enforcement. When you talk to law enforcement, I disagree with the good representative from Arapahoe County. Law enforcement's not asking for this. They're not saying this is going to keep our communities safer. They're not saying these are the tools that we need in order to protect our children and families. They're not. And so it is hard for me to support a bill that does not support our law enforcement, that does not support the safety of our communities. And I do believe that this bill does infringe on that ability to work with local law enforcement. And so for those reasons, I am a no vote today. But I do appreciate the conversations and the stories that I've heard in the well about your families and how you got here and your communities, because I think that is the fabric of America. And so with that, I'm a no vote. Thank you.
Representative Mabry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, and it's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you, sir.
Members, I want to touch on how critical this legislation is in light of our commitment here in the state of Colorado to the rule of law. The reason why that is so critical is because right now we are living through the most brazen affront to the rule of law in the modern history of this country. On March 15th, Kilmar Abrigo Garcia was sent to a Salvadorian prison without due process as part of this administration's mass deportation program, along with hundreds of other men, 90% of whom have no criminal record. The administration has even acknowledged in federal court that it deported Abrigo Garcia in error. Kilmar Abrigo Garcia was deported with no due process, and he is in a prison that is infamous for torturing inmates, where those who run it brag that the only way out is in a coffin. He had a protection order, and the President of the United States is openly ignoring an order from the United States Supreme Court to facilitate his return. This bill affirms our commitment to due process in the rule of law, while the administration is sending human beings who have not had their day in court, the vast majority with no criminal record, to an infamous gulag in El Salvador. They now contend that no court has the power to stop them. Members, it was Thomas Jefferson who called the right of habeas corpus to protect against the unlawful detention one of the essential principles of our government. Everyone in this room, regardless of party, should be horrified at the chilling proposition that no one can stop the administration from imprisoning any people it wants anywhere else in the world. The president has openly stated that he would like to send citizens to these prisons next. What this bill says is get a warrant. Prove that you're following the process at a time when the position of the administration is that nothing could stop them from jailing its critics in another country and then claiming no court has jurisdiction to remedy the situation. Members, this means we're living in a world where Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, or any federal law enforcement agency could apprehend anyone and ignore the requirements for due process and ship them to El Salvador just to claim that they are out of the reach of the power of the courts. And these individuals have no legal recourse. There could be no mistake about what this means. This administration is creating its own gulags with no more judicial review than existed when Stalin did the same thing in the Soviet Union. If the government can disappear anyone it wants and dump them in a Salvadorian dungeon and prevent any court in this country from providing relief, we should all be very afraid. And I'm proud that here in the state of Colorado we're passing a bill that makes you follow the process. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in a dissent, identified how much is at stake here. The implications of the government's position are that not only non-citizens, but United States citizens could be taken off the streets, forced onto plane, confined to foreign prisons with no opportunity for redress if judicial review is denied unlawfully before removal. History is no stranger to such lawless regimes, but our nation's system of laws are designed to prevent, not enable, their rise. That system of laws is being ignored, and this bill is an affirmation that we believe that that system of laws should be followed. I also just want to talk a little bit about immigration and how important immigrants are to our communities. And I thank the bill sponsors, and I'm excited to hear from some of my colleagues who are themselves immigrants to talk about what this bill means to them. But every American who ever lived, with the exception of the indigenous, was either an immigrant themselves or a descendant of immigrants. And I'm always confounded when my fellow Americans are passionate about keeping new arrivals down or cracking down on people who came here without documentation. Did the Pilgrims have documentation? Every great wave of new arrivals have been met with backlash. The Irish, the Italians, German immigrants moving to New York City in the 1850s faced discrimination. And the anti-immigrant rhetoric that led to the Chinese Exclusion Act of the 1880s, I see no difference between that rhetoric and that movement and the movement that has led to the mass deportation efforts of Donald Trump. This is a nation of immigrants, and every aspect of our economy has profited from the contribution of immigrants. Washington himself, for all his faults, stated, "I had always hoped that this land might become a safe and agreeable asylum to the virtuous and persecuted part of mankind, to whatever nation they might belong." Of course, President Washington did not mean slaves, but to the extent that his hope has become true, it is the most beautiful thing about this country. Politicians at every level of government, including in my own party, are playing games with the lives of new arrivals, linking crime and migration. I've heard a lot about the governor's State of the State address and how he had talked about we want to make sure we're deporting criminals. I actually thought that those remarks by the governor were misguided and harmful because there is no link between crime and migration. Immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than citizens. We have a criminal justice system that holds criminals accountable for the crimes that they commit. And of course, that's a good thing. That is separate from our immigration system. And again, I want to emphasize the data from the United States Department of Justice shows time and time again that migrants are less likely to commit crimes than U.S. citizens. The militarized mass deportations ignored court orders and detention camps, fly in the face of our Colorado values, because we are not afraid of foreigners. For many of us once were foreigners. I'm proud to support this bill.
Representative Ricks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I have been a long resident of Aurora since 1980. My family moved there after we escaped a bloody civil war in Liberia, West Africa. And Aurora has been my home. We are a proud city. We have over 160 different languages that are spoken in our public schools. We're very diverse. We're the fourth most diverse city in the country. And last year, Aurora was launched into the public view because of incidents that happened in North Aurora. They had a lot of negative rhetoric about gang members running wild in the street, people being, whole apartment buildings that were overtaken by gangs. And a lot of that was blown out of proportion. I've heard so many comments here about how Aurora needs saving. We don't need saving. We have a police force. We were able to take care of the people who were running wild. Any criminal elements were arrested. But yet, that rhetoric, like the good representative from La Anima said, is used for fundraising. It's used to continue to perpetuate the myth that immigrants are criminals. And that saddens me, because when you're talking about immigrants, the hardworking people who are my neighbors, myself, it's wrong to continue to stereotype and lump us all in the bucket that we're all, criminal elements, we're gang members. And the truth is that according to the Department of Justice, the studies show that immigrants, US-born citizens, were 10 times more likely than immigrants to be incarcerated for committing weapons-related offenses, 5 times more likely for violent offenses, and more than twice as likely for property crimes. So this is a villainization of a group of people, and it should stop. We use a lot of fear here, fear tactics to make us afraid of each other. But the truth is, most of my immigrant neighbors and myself, we're here to contribute to this society, and we're proud to do so every day. If there isn't a pathway to citizenship, we all want to see people legalized. And if they are criminal element, they should be arrested and be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But for those people who are just trying to make a way for themselves to ensure that their families have access to an education, have access to jobs, want to contribute to this society, we should think about them and be a little bit more compassionate. What this bill is going to do is to protect everyone, because when the most vulnerable people in our society and community are criminally penalized indiscriminately, we're all unsafe. So we talk about safety, but if the people who are not committing crimes are just being pulled off the streets just for their mere presence, it's going to happen to us too eventually, those of us that are citizens. As a representative from Aurora with the most diverse group, I say yes to protecting people. Immigrants contribute greatly to our economy. We need the immigrant labor force. So we really should be supporting people. What is going on at the federal level, regardless of what party you're on, there are things that our civil rights are being violated. And most of us, if we want to be honest, know this is not the America that we have all believed in. And our rights are being eroded every day by the government. Please vote yes to protect people, immigrants. Immigrants are hardworking. They're working 2 to 3 jobs to help their families and contribute to our economy. And they pay taxes, regardless of what we say, but they cannot get taxes back or tax returns back. So vote for this bill. It's going to keep all of us safe. And if you really care about Aurora, please keep shopping there. We want to see you there. It's a very safe city. Come and spend your money. But we don't need anybody to save us. Thank you.
Representative Gilchrist.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I stand in strong support of this bill because it ensures we protect all those living in our great state. I think we're at a turning point in our country, and we're faced with the challenge to truly live up to our promise and continue to embrace that we are a nation of immigrants. This country was largely built by people who have arrived from somewhere else, often seeking freedom, safety, and opportunity. I am so deeply proud to be from Denver and represent a part of this great city in this chamber every day. And when busloads of people showed up in our city, shipped from another state, we rose to the challenge. Communities organized and showed up to support the men, women, and children who came here for a better life. And our government worked tirelessly to ensure that those folks were protected, they found employment, and they found housing. And we succeeded. We rose to the challenge. This bill addresses the next challenge of protecting the people who have come here and are a part of our communities. I always struggle with the notion that if we're filled with emotion about a policy, that somehow it isn't good policy. The best policy is crafted through thoughtful negotiation, reflects lived experience, and is driven by strong emotion. That is what this bill is. I have pursued a career in public service because I believe that government can be a place where we come together to solve our greatest challenges. And in my first year here, I have seen that to be true over and over again. This is one of those great challenges. We should pass this bill. We should protect those living in our state and live up to our promise. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. Yearning to breathe free. I strongly urge a yes vote today.
Representative Espinosa.
Emma Lazarus' poem always strikes me, so give me just a second. I rise today because my life's work has been in immigration. And so as I start today, I will tell you, over 40 years of work in immigration leads me to the understanding that our system is broken, and it has been broken for those many years. I was a young lawyer when the legalization program passed in Ronald Reagan's administration, begun through the Blue Ribbon Commission and President Carter's administration, finally provided some relief for the individuals that have been hiding in shadows for years at the time. I have since become a prosecutor where I've engaged in the intersection of crime and immigration and how it plays out. I saw our country become more and more hostile towards immigrants who had committed crimes. Our history in the government was really just barring crimes of moral turpitude, prostitution, and murder for over a century. At the end of the last century, we increased that and took many crimes that in our city and our state are misdemeanors and made them aggravated felonies in a definition of a funny, crazy federal world. I spent years applying those definitions and interpreting the distinction between when a state law and a federal law were compared for the elements of what a criminal conviction was for the purposes of immigration, which someone who was navigating that system may or may not have known. And I start today my discussion with regard to this bill to demonstrate this is not a federal immigration bill. And this is not an interpretation or application of how that intersectionality between crime and immigration work. This is a constitutional protection bill. And the reason it is so critical, building off of what so many of you have said, is because we are at a crossroads in our country with polarization and with misunderstandings of the complexity that we're looking at when we talk about immigration, tax policy, tariffs. We are not hearing each other. But the only way we as a state can stand is if we hold on to the very dear principles that are listed in our constitutions, the state and the federal. This bill was a labor of love by the co-prime sponsors, and I appreciate their heart and soul that went into it. But I will tell you, I took a scalpel to this bill many times over and over and over again because I wanted to make sure that we tailored this bill to ground it in the due process constitutional provisions that we are seeking for every individual in this country and mostly for our residents in the state of Colorado. This is a constitutional bill because it's meant to protect the fundamental constitutional requirements of the 4th, 5th, 6th, 14th Amendments, which all say every individual, every person is entitled to these protections. It's the reason so many of your ancestors came here to build a better life. It's the reason that my ancestors decided not to go back to Mexico when the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo made the border cross us. We didn't cross the border. It is a reason because those principles of due process are fundamental to who we are as a country and as Americans. I've heard people talk about the bad apples, and we've always had laws to deal with the bad apples in immigration. The question here, as the representative from Arapahoe County talked about, is not the question of whether we will enforce criminal laws, and I think others have raised this as well. In fact, we will. This law, and it's important to know, we say on page 11 of the newest version of the bill, just hot off the press, is this article shall not interfere with criminal investigations or proceedings that are authorized by judicial process or to restrict a state agency employee or political subdivision employee from fully investigating, participating, cooperating with, or assisting federal law enforcement agencies in criminal investigations. So we are not abandoning our responsibility to cooperate. And we can do nothing, and I will clarify a little with the Colorado Springs raid, we can do nothing when the federal government decides to not let us as a state or the federal government as an entity prosecute people for the criminal violations that they were engaging in prostitution and weapons and drug charges, because that's harder to prove when you have to give someone full criminal due process rights. And in lieu of that, what we are now seeing is the reason federal immigration enforcement is accompanying those agencies that did that raid is so they can divert anyone who is not a citizen into deportation proceedings. And I pray that the federal courts continue to say that individuals in those proceedings still get the due process rights that they should have. But right now we're seeing cutbacks in that as well. And it's in part because of those cutbacks that we must stand to not be partners in the immigration enforcement as distinguished from the criminal enforcement. Because as we see due process rights being stripped and individuals not being given their day in court, 2-year-old U.S. citizen children not being given an opportunity to stay with other family members in the United States because they have a right to do so. These are the concerns that the state must stand for to ensure that those due process proceedings are always, those due process requirements of the Constitution are always followed. I heard someone ask, why do we do this? What's the issue? Why did we let those people in? And my good colleague from Denver just talked about that crisis that we faced last year, not even from being a border state, but because a governor from a border state decided to send busloads of people to us. And as our mayor in Denver went to Congress and testified and said, we looked at that humanitarian crisis, people fleeing for the same reasons that my colleague from Aurora or my colleague from originally from South Africa and now from, I believe, Weld, talked about. Families who fled here because they were under threats of violence and fear. They had family members who had been killed, and they came to this country hoping for the due process protections that we provide, hoping for those new starts. And most of those Venezuelans who crossed the border last year, that's what they were fleeing from. A government in shambles, engaging in extraterritorial kind of horrors against their citizenry. It was a humanitarian crisis, and we responded as a country. I pulled up the executive orders of President Biden because I heard people say he'd open the borders. In fact, his executive orders were to tighten restrictions for asylum, to tighten restrictions for the methods of processing immigrants across the border, to evaluate the push and pull factors that were causing people to come to the country. Very complicated, very difficult. We've not had a comprehensive immigration bill on the docket since our own Senator Bennett led that charge in 2020 as a part of a gang of 8. We know that's a federal issue. This bill is a state issue. And I just want to close with this other notion in terms of how I've pushed my colleagues who drafted this bill. We really looked at these provisions in 2 grounds. I've spoken deeply about the due process and constitutional tie, and that's what the majority of the bill is tied to, is processes and procedures to ensure that we're not being commandeered, our money's not being commandeered by the federal government to engage in federal enforcement. But the second part of this bill is to clarify to our public political subdivisions and our police departments and the libraries, hospitals, and child care facilities that the reality is that any day a nice person can come knocking at your door. And if they do, we want you to be prepared and to have articulated a policy. We're not saying don't cooperate. If they have a warrant, we will always cooperate. But you, acting in a capacity, have an obligation to at least inform your
30
clients
seconds.
and your employees about how that process should unfold, to protect them from chaos or to protect them from allegations of obstruction of justice. Because by being clear, by setting policies, by establishing standards, we protect not only the people who might be targeted for immigration enforcement, but all of our citizens as well. Thank you.
Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. It's an honor to serve with you.
An honor to serve with you.
First of all, having a former federal immigration judge here matters, and I find that information persuasive. I'm concise, of course. I think there were great speeches here today, and I think that great points were made on both sides. Yes, let's work together on a path to citizenship. Yes, let's support military. Yes, let's support working families, especially in rural. Yes, to all of that. But for me today, this is really easy because I'm a civil rights attorney and I work in schools and I support the good work of school resource officers And I do not want ICE in schools. In the words of Pink Floyd, leave the kids alone. And I'm going to end with the most important words that I learned in my first session. Good bill, vote yes.
Further discussion, Representative Wilford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I don't often get up and talk on other people's bills, but this one I feel really strongly about. I tell a lot of stories in the well because stories are who we are. They make our communities, they make our lived histories, and stories move us to action, emotional or not. My grandmother was born near the Clyde in Glasgow, Scotland. As a child during World War II, she carried a gas mask in one hand and a lunchbox in the other. She met my grandfather, who was in the military, at a bus stop, and they got married. And when he retired, they moved to a small farm in Kentucky and chased the promise of a better life than either of them had had. She believed in America, in its opportunity and in its welcome. And growing up, I saw how many times she was asked, how many times we were stopped in the grocery store when somebody would hear her accent and say, "Where are you from? How long have you been here?" We ask a lot of those same questions today, but not anymore out of curiosity, and too often out of suspicion. And in the last 110 days, we've watched policies and politicians tear at the soul of this nation, demonizing immigrants, separating families, turning our backs on people who came here seeking shelter, safety, and a shot at the dream that we all say that we believe in. Let me be clear, that is not who we are, and it's not who we can afford to become. Every single one of us in this room and outside of this room has a story like the one I just shared with you. Every single one of us knows what it means to risk something for the people that we love. Now is the moment to fight for those stories and to fight for immigrant families and to make sure that the American dream stays within reach for all of us, but especially for every Coloradan. Thank you.
Representative Luck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Legislation is a funny business, especially out in the world where people tend to read headlines or catch 30 seconds on a news channel or overhear something at a coffee shop. And I'm not going to speak to the specifics of this policy, but I am going to speak to an underlying concern that I have for the population that is contemplated in this bill to protect. I fear that this bill is going to give a false sense of security about their status in Colorado, such that when this bill passes through and the news reports on it, folks are going to perceive that raids like the one that happened in Colorado Springs or in Aurora, they will no longer happen. I just hope that if the desire is to stabilize this community such that they come out of hiding, so to speak, and back into schools and other places, that you all help to communicate to them, this does nothing to stop what the federal government will do. Because if they believe that they are protected by Colorado and they end up not being protected, I dare say that will be even more devastating to them than what they currently experience. So that's all I wanted to say.
Representatives Garcia and Velasco. Representative Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for engaging in this debate about upholding our constitutional civil rights for all Coloradans. You know, I think what's important is to acknowledge that when we see citizens and non-citizens being rounded up and shipped away without any due process, we must stand against those illegal actions and ensure that the civil and constitutional rights are upheld in this state. I want to remind all of us, and we've heard it a few times, but I think I need to say it again and again and again, that we have a criminal justice system that addresses when people commit crimes. And yes, that is absolutely being conflated with a civil violation that causes immigration enforcement. Now, what happens in those cases? We heard and we've talked about, and I've brought up Colorado Springs. Over 100 people were detained without due process. So you know what? We actually don't even know if they committed a single crime. But you know who we do know who committed a crime? A member of our U.S. military. He was charged. But not a single person who was rounded up for detention was charged with a crime. Does that mean that they did not commit a crime? No. But that means that justice is robbed from anyone who may have been a victim, or if they had, on their due process. And when we violate due process, we violate justice. When we violate due process, we send citizens to El Salvador. When we violate due process, we send people with legal status to unknown encampments. This law does not violate a single federal law because throughout this bill, we are referencing and we are pointing back to federal law. We've heard comments about the right way. But people are getting detained when they are doing the right thing and going to their routine immigration check-in. They are doing the right thing and still getting detained and deported without due process. (276) seeks to strengthen Colorado's policies around the key issues that affect our immigration populations. And some of these critical measures are around protecting personal identifying information, expanding that protection of our personal identifying information to schools, healthcare facilities, and childcare centers. That allows us to keep our critical services going for all Coloradans because there is clarity in place of what happens when an ICE action takes place. Notice that I'm saying when because everyone here knows that there is 0 sense of false hope, especially in our immigration population. They know more than anyone here in this room that they are not living risk-free. My wife is afraid to leave the house and she is a citizen, is brown, speaks with an accent. Violation of due process opens the door wide open for profiling. She tells me, check in every day. Check in when you get there, check in when you're leaving. Because I might be first and you might be second, she says. We have talked about, thank you, you can be seated. We have talked about, or we have heard about the unbearable cost of immigrants to taxpayers. Well, I will have you know that in Colorado alone, undocumented immigrants have paid $436.5 million in taxes in 2022 alone. They have paid $436.5 million in taxes in 2022 alone. This helps fund our critical investments in education, Social Security, public safety, and infrastructure. Deporting immigrants is not about public safety. Public safety is about ensuring that those who are charged with ensuring our public safety are not distracted by civil matters. Deporting immigrants is costing jobs for citizens and non-citizens alike. For every 500,000 immigrants deported, 44,000 US-born workers lose their jobs. This bill is a declaration to our commitment to civil and constitutional rights in this state for everyone who calls this state home. If we claim to be driven by the Constitution, then join me in voting yes.
Representative Velasco.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I want to start by thanking everyone that has helped us with this bill and supported this bill. We have the endorsement of the Women's Caucus, the LGBTQ Caucus, the Latino Caucus, and we also heard very powerful words from the Black Caucus in support of this bill yesterday. And I want to thank all our colleagues who shared their stories. I want to thank all the advocates and everyone outside the building that has worked so hard for these policies to move forward, not only today, but in the past decade, and that all of this work would not be possible without you. And I want to share a little bit of my story, as many of my colleagues did. I am the first Mexican-born legislator in the state of Colorado, the first Latina to ever represent the Western Slope. And all of us carry with us our identities from our being queer, being brown, being a new American, all the things that move us forward and our values. And I am proud to be in this chamber that is so diverse. And I appreciate all of you that came forward. And my immigration journey really, I think, has always been in my family. My grandpa was in the Bracero program. He was an agriculture worker that would come work in the fields and go back home and bring money home. Then my dad was able to get a green card and come to the US and work as an agriculture worker. And these are our essential workers that put the food on our tables. But he applied for my family to get a visa to come with him, and that took 16 years. And we are lucky to be able to stay home and wait 16 years for the opportunity. And we are lucky that we could go through that process. And I didn't become a US citizen until 20 years later. So the process can look many different ways, but people are doing the right thing. When you come and ask for asylum, you have to show up at the port of entry. When you want to apply for a visa, you follow the requirements. And many of the people that come here must have a sponsor from a job. They must already have a job lined up to come here and work. For me, it was my dad that was able to apply for us. And we go through the process of arriving to a new place. I was lucky to arrive to the mountain area and see the snow for the first time and go to high school and learn English. But it was not easy. And I think as many of our colleagues shared, that we have to work 2 jobs or 3 to pay rent. We have to support each other. We are dealing with barriers of access as all the working families of the state. So I think that there's so much that we have in common and so much that we fight for. But we also know that our communities are under attack, that our communities have been told that we were not allowed to go into different places, that there was signs that said, no Mexicans allowed here in the state of Colorado. And that the work that we are doing is just to elevate that our human rights, that our constitutional rights do not stay behind when we cross the border. They come with us. And I want to share some facts from this bill, that this bill does not prevent federal authorities from doing their job. This bill places no restrictions on local law enforcement's ability to investigate criminal investigations. This bill does not prevent deportation. It simply ensures that people are not unlawfully detained beyond their court-ordered release. This bill does not ban communication. It ensures that local agencies aren't unlawfully holding people at ICE's request without a court's approval. If due process has been completed and a judge has approved release, that person has a right to go free. And that applies to all of us, no matter our immigration status. This bill does not provide immigrants with more rights than citizens, but it ensures equal treatment under the law. And this bill is saving the state money because we are streamlining different processes in the state. So we are actually giving back to the state $70,000. And I want to share that I am proud to live in Colorado, where we stand up for human and constitutional rights, to uphold our civil rights, and that we know that parents would sacrifice anything for their babies and their children. And that is a universal feeling here and in other countries. But I want to share with the millions of people watching at home and the building and outside the building that we will prevail. We will thrive. We will continue fighting for a Colorado for all. And we are stronger together. I urge a yes vote.
The motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 276 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote.
Please close the machine. With 42 aye, 21 no, and 2 excused, Senate Bill 276 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we will now break for committee, and as soon as the last committee ends, we will have a call of the House, so please don't go far. I also have one more announcement. For those asking, it is against House rules to ask to display playoff games on the Jumbotron during debate.
Uh-oh.
However, our dedicated Mr. Shebel has agreed that he will share the scores of either game to anyone who comes up to ask. Thank you. With that,
Wait, Madam Majority Leader, we do have some announcements. Thank you. Mr. Shebel, please read reports of committees of reference.
Committee on Appropriations, after consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bills 27 as amended, 3475, 84 as amended, 189, 272, 297, 302, 316, 319, and 320 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Representative Mabry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the Judiciary Committee will meet at 12:15 in room 107. We're going to hear Senate Bill 288, Senate Bill 281, and Senate Bill 304. 12:15, room 107. Thank you.
Representative Lindstedt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Finance Committee will meet a little bit faster than Judiciary at 12:10 to hear Senate Bill 309 and 306.
Are those my only two committees today? I think so. Oh, there he is. I knew there was one other. Representative Brown, you failed to sign up. You're usually late to vote on the board. Now you're running to the well. Representative Brown.
The session ends the way it began. Today we will hear 4 bills in Health and Human Services. We will meet in 10 minutes in 112. We will hear 17, 48, 124, and 71. See you there.
Thank you. Representative Sirota.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On Monday at 8:30 a.m., House Appropriations will meet in the Old State Library to hear Senate Bill 7, Senate Bill 163, Senate Bill 165, and any others that may be referred to House Appropes at that time.
Thank you. All right, Madam Majority Leader. Oh, I have an announcement. Representative Lukens will substitute for Representative Zokai on the House Finance Committee for today only, and Speaker Pro Tem Basenecker will substitute for Representative Garcia on House Finance committee for today only. Madam Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until later today.
The House will stand in recess until later today.